Picture a sun-baked pirate ship cutting through endless blue waves, its black flag snapping in the wind. Hollywood wants you to believe these sea wolves spent their days guzzling rum and living the high life. But here's the brutal truth that'll shatter every romantic pirate fantasy you've ever had. Most pirates weren't drowning their sorrows in alcohol, Heavst. They were literally dying of thirst.
Surrounded by millions of gallons of water they couldn't drink, mocked by the ocean's cruel abundance.
Every wave that crashed over the bow was a reminder of liquid death surrounding them.
The irony was enough to drive a man mad. Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink.
For pirates, this wasn't just poetry. It was a daily nightmare that haunted every voyage. When your tongue feels like leather and your lips crack like old parchment, priorities change fast.
Every swallow feels like sandpaper scraping down your throat, making fresh water more valuable than Spanish gold.
These weren't just sailors looking for their next drink. They were survivors playing against time itself. Pirates faced a deadly game against dehydration and the cruel mathematics of liquid rationing every single day. The question that haunted every captain wasn't about treasure assists. It was about crew survival time. How long could their men survive on whatever murky liquid sloshed around in rotting wooden barrels?
But water scarcity wasn't the only challenge waiting to break these hardened sea wolves completely.
The fresh water they managed to store quickly became something that would turn your stomach.
Every pirate ship carried its liquid lifeline in massive wooden barrels, sealed tight against contamination.
Stored in the deepest, darkest parts of the hull, away from sunlight and salt spray.
Crews would load up with crystal clear water from mountain springs, convinced they'd solved their problems. What they got instead was a floating science experiment that would horrify modern health inspectors. Within weeks, that pristine water transformed into a green, slimy soup with a life of its own.
The wooden barrels became tiny ecosystems, brewing disgusting life in the ship's dark belly below.
Algae bloomed in brilliant green clouds, turning drinking water into something resembling witch's brew entirely.
But the real horror show came when crews opened barrels and found them teeming with life.
White, writhing worms and mysterious creatures that nobody could identify swimming in their water supply. One ship's cook described it as opening a barrel of nightmares, Cade. The water moved more than the ocean. Pirates, being practical survivors, developed their first ingenious hack. If you can't beat slime, mask it.
They'd pour generous amounts of rum or vinegar into putrid water to disguise the revolting taste.
The alcohol served double purpose, making liquid drinkable while hopefully killing whatever lived inside those barrels. Captains became masters of positive spin, convincing crews that wiggling worms were actually extra protein additions.
Drink up, boys. Those little swimmers will put meat on your bones.
Whether crews believed this cheerful interpretation or desperately wanted to, they choked down wormy water anyway.
They pretended it was fine, because the alternative was admitting they might die of thirst.
As hard as this was, something even worse waited ahead for these desperate sea wolves. The mathematical cruelty of rationing that turned every single drop into precious liquid gold for survival.
When floating on endless ocean with 200 thirsty pirates, mathematics becomes a matter of life and death.
Every pirate, from lowliest deck scrubber to most feared captain, received exactly 1 quart of water daily. That's it. 4 cups of liquid covering drinking, cooking, and desperate attempts at washing salt and grime.
Modern survival experts recommend at least a gallon per person in hot climates. Pirates survived on 1/4.
All while doing back-breaking physical labor under the scorching tropical sun that never stopped beating down. Pirate codes weren't romantic guidelines about treasure sharing. They were survival documents treating water distribution seriously.
These weren't suggestions written in fancy language. They were laws carved into ship culture with deadly consequences.
Breaking water rationing rules meant death for everyone, so codes were followed with religious devotion and fear. The famous equal bellies rule meant captains shared the same rations as their lowliest crew members. This created a democracy of desperation that kept crews together when lesser leaders might face mutiny.
Smart captains understood that commanding starving, thirsty men while staying full would soon end their leadership permanently.
The mathematics of survival demanded unity. Everyone suffered equally, or everyone died together in the ocean. When precious barrels showed more air than liquid, even experienced sea wolves knew time was running out. The rationing created its own twisted economy aboard pirate ships that defied all logical sense completely. Crews would gamble their future water rations in card games, betting tomorrow's half cup on lucky hands. One ship's log mentions a sailor losing an entire week's worth of water in one evening. This forced the captain to create new rules, limiting bets to 3 days' rations a maximum for safety. Apparently, some pirates were terrible at both cards and math, creating dangerous situations for entire crews. Their struggle didn't end there. When barrels ran dry, desperation grew even more dangerous and creative. Pirates learned to pray for the very thing that usually terrified them most: yakit, violent ocean storms. When water supplies dropped to dangerous levels, crews started eyeing each other with wild, desperate looks. The sight of dark clouds gathering on the horizon could transform quarreling pirates into coordinated teams. Working with Swiss watch precision, they became water harvesters when the heavens finally opened up above. Pirates stretched massive canvas sails into elaborate funnel systems, turning entire ships into floating water collectors.
Every rope, every scrap of canvas, every bucket and barrel pressed into service during precious rainstorms.
One sailor's account describes pirates licking water straight off rigging, collecting it in their filly hats. They wrung out their clothes into precious containers, desperate to catch every possible drop from above.
The sight of grown men weeping with relief while gulping rainwater from boots tells the story.
Pirates positioned themselves under every rope corner, mouths open like baby birds seeking precious water streams.
The men have become human rain gutters with enthusiasm.
But storms were unreliable partners in survival, bringing either salvation or just more deadly danger ahead. They might dump thousands of gallons just out of reach, or bring only winds threatening destruction. Pirates learned to read clouds like treasure maps, predicting which storms would bring life-saving water. One experienced captain wrote, "A storm without rain is like a woman without mercy, beautiful but deadly." The desperate efficiency of rainwater operations was something to behold when crews worked together perfectly. A single good storm could fill dozens of barrels, transforming dying crews into men with hope.
But when skies remained cruelly clear for weeks, pirates turned to another source requiring ultimate risk.
Landfall became more than just a break from monotony, a thumi. It became salvation itself for thirsty crews. Pirates developed mystical abilities to spot land from impossible distances, trained by pure desperation for survival.
Their eyes caught the slightest hint of green on horizons or bird flight patterns, meaning freshwater.
Uninhabited islands became treasure chests of a different sort, holding the most precious resource of all. Pirates sent scouting parties ashore to search for freshwater springs, following animal paths and vegetation signs.
When they found a spring, discovery was greeted with more celebration than finding actual Spanish treasure.
One crew reportedly spent 3 entire days doing nothing but drinking fresh water and filling containers. Their captain noted, "I have never seen men so excited about something that cost absolutely nothing." The desperate lengths pirates went to secure water sources would shock people with modern sensibilities completely. They would dig shallow wells on beaches, hoping to hit fresh water floating above heavier saltwater. Sometimes it worked, sometimes they got brackish water, but they tried because death was the alternative. When inhabited islands offered better sources, pirates faced moral calculations that often ended badly for locals.
Raiding villages for their wells became as common as stealing gold from merchant ships passing by.
Some crews left behind trails of dried-up settlements in their desperate wake across the Caribbean islands.
But smart pirates understood that destroying water sources was like burning their own future survival chances. They needed these places to exist for return visits, so some established crude protection agreements instead.
Pirates would offer protection from other crews in exchange for reliable access to freshwater sources below.
The logistics of moving water from island springs to ships were absolutely staggering in their complexity.
Pirates formed human chains, stretching from sources to boats, passing casks like the most precious cargo. Because, in truth, they were handling something more valuable than doubloons, liquid life itself for survival. One ship's log describes hauling spring water like buried treasure, but better, you can't drink coins. Even desperate island raids couldn't always be counted on when crews needed water the very most. That drove them to target something even more precious than treasure ships, vessels carrying liquid gold. Pirates scanning horizons weren't always looking for Spanish galleons loaded with silver and precious gold coins. Often, they were hunting something far more valuable: merchant ships carrying barrels of fresh water supplies. These water wagons of the sea became prime targets for crews running dangerously low on resources. The irony wasn't lost half. Pirates abandoning chests of actual treasure because they needed water space. The psychology of water raids was fascinating when merchant captains faced unexpected pirate demands for supplies. Merchants expected to lose gold and jewels, but were confused when pirates pointed at water stores. Many were so puzzled they handed over liquid supplies without a fight, not understanding pirate priorities. One captured merchant wrote, "They left silver coins but took every drop. I was puzzled, not frightened." Pirates developed intelligence networks specifically for tracking water supplies along merchant routes through informants in ports. They knew which routes carried ships loaded with provisions for colonial settlements in the New World.
Information about ships carrying 2 months of fresh water was worth more than rumors of gold.
The raids themselves often became exercises in strange courtesy between pirates and their victims below deck. Pirates would board vessels with singular focus, ignoring valuables to head straight for the water stores. One merchant described pirates methodically testing each barrel before taking it, rejecting anything tasting slightly off.
"They were pickier about our water than my wife is about her tea," he wrote with bewilderment.
Successful water pirates understood survival mathematics from both sides of these dangerous raids across the Caribbean seas. They left merchant crews with just enough fresh water to reach nearest ports safely after raids. Not from kindness, but from practical calculation, Tav. Dead merchants couldn't spread word about reasonable pirates. One captain told merchant crews, "We'll take what we need, leave what you need." Fairer than oceans. But even successful water raids couldn't solve every problem when pirates found themselves in empty waters.
Far from any potential targets, they attempted solutions that pushed boundaries of desperation and dangerous ingenuity.
When down to last cups of disgusting water, some crews attempted what could be called experimental science.
The most ambitious tried crude distillation, flute, boiling seawater to capture steam and condense it back.
In theory, this could work perfectly. In practice, it was disaster waiting to happen aboard wooden ships. Every scrap of fuel was precious, and every flame was potential catastrophe on vessels made of wood. Pirates rigged makeshift stills using cooking pots, spare canvas, and whatever metal tubing they could improvise desperately. The process required constant fire, hot enough to boil seawater, while simultaneously cooling steam for condensation. All while the ship rocked with every wave, making precision nearly impossible to maintain during operations. One ship's engineer noted, "We're recreating God's rain cycle using kitchen equipment and prayer, asold. Result predictable. Fuel requirements made distillation impractical through. Boiling seawater consumed wood needed for cooking and emergency repairs completely." Crews found themselves with few cups of distilled water, but no fuel left for basic survival. Desperation drove some pirates to try drinking small amounts of seawater, believing their bodies could adapt. This was a deadly mistake, Trimus. Drinking seawater actually accelerates dehydration, requiring more fresh water to process. Pirates attempting gradual adaptation methods often died more quickly than those who abstained from seawater entirely. Creative experiments involved creating drinkable liquids from whatever organic matter they could drag up in nets.
Some crews attempted brewing seaweed tea by boiling various ocean plants found floating near the ship.
Results were uniformly disgusting and often made crews violently sick, but desperate men try anything. These failed experiments revealed how human bodies rebel when pushed beyond limits, creating cascading new problems. The cruel mathematics of dehydration and malnutrition created nightmares that transformed tough pirates into walking disasters. It started subtly, bleeding gums when eating rock-hard biscuits, making every meal a painful ordeal. Then came loose teeth wobbling in sockets like loose nails in rotting wood, falling out completely. Pirates who had terrified merchant crews with fearsome grins found themselves toothless and unable to chew. Old wounds mysteriously reopened, bleeding as if they were fresh injuries sustained just moments before discovery. Scurvy killed more pirates than Spanish cannons, storms, and sword fights combined throughout their dangerous careers. The disease was slow, torturous death that could claim 6% of crews on long voyages.
Dehydration compounded every problem. Without adequate water, wounds heal slower and
Pirates began seeing mirages of freshwater springs on empty horizons, their minds playing cruel tricks. Some became convinced they could smell rain in perfectly clear skies, talking to imaginary companions daily. The combination created feedback loops of misery. Couldn't digest food without water, couldn't waste water. Men who once terrorized the Caribbean reduced to scratching at lice and boils like mangy dogs.
Pirates developed gallows humor, nicknaming wormy water Poseidon's revenge, and rotting teeth natural dentures for survival.
They called bleeding gums ruby smiles and pretended malnutrition weight loss made them fighting trim for battles. This dark humor kept men sane when their bodies betrayed them in the most horrific ways. Through suffering, crews discovered their greatest weapon against despair wasn't medicine plus, it was brotherhood forged together. The crews that survived understood unity wasn't nice to have here. It was the difference between life and death. Smart captains doubled down on equal bellies rules, sharing moldy biscuits and wormy water with everyone.
Pirates developed elaborate meal rituals that transformed survival into something approaching celebration of life and hope.
Sea shanties became psychological warfare against despair.
The gambling economy around rations was really betting on tomorrow itself, the sheik, making statements about believing in survival.
Pirates created celebrations from smallest victories, marking time by moments of grace that broke up suffering.
The mathematics of survival weren't just about calories and shit. They were about maintaining human connections for endurance.
In the end, they discovered the greatest treasure wasn't gold,